Welcome to PeepSec. I'm David, the Chief Product Officer at CybSafe. Today I'm joined by Kevin. Kevin works in speech to text and is passionate about helping people. Thanks for joining me today, Kevin.
Thanks very much for having me.
To start with, you're currently working at Deepgram. Could you tell us a little bit about what you do there and why you decided to get involved with it?
Sure. So I'm a senior developer advocate at Deepgram. Deepgram is a speech recognition API, which allows developers to generate transcripts from voice data. And my role comprises many things involving creating content to help educate developers on how to use our product, building demos to help people understand what's possible, and also representing Deepgram at events. And I'm part of a wider team of people doing similar things.
You have used Deepgram in your spare time to do some personal projects. There's one in particular, the Captioning badge, which got some really great traction. Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, I'm very happy with the feedback it got because I wasn't expecting it. So the project was born from the fact that I was going to my first event in 2 years and I'm still very COVID conscious, so I planned on wearing my mask throughout. But I do recognize that by wearing a mask, I make it harder for other people to understand what I'm saying, either because they're hard of hearing or because we all actually, I think, have realized that we rely on subtle cues or subtle lip reading, which isn't really possible when you're wearing a mask. So I built a little badge which sat on my little dungaree bib here, a little screen, and there was a little microphone clipped onto my dungaree kind of strap, and it would listen to the words I say, even with my mask on, and it would display them for people around me. So I tweeted that out. I built it in a few hours on an evening ahead of the event, and it got quite a lot of traction, way more than I expected. Certainly, if I knew, I wouldn't have recorded the video at that angle. And then I got, feedback, would it be good to do this and that? And over the next kind of week, I dedicated quite a lot of time to iterating upon that first version.
And clearly your passion for helping people and empathy for people doesn't stop there. You're involved in running an organisation called You've Got This. Could you tell us a bit about that too, please?
Yeah, so You Got This is a learning hub focused entirely on core skills, sometimes called soft skills, needed for a happy, healthy work life. I observed that there were always talks about soft skills and empathy at tech conferences, or often were, but they always happened scarcely in the last slot of a conference, clashing with something great. And that was it. That was all our industry had to offer in terms of helping people understand all of those auxiliary skills they need. And so I decided to spin up an event which started as an annual event and has since grown significantly, focused entirely on that topic or on those topics, with developers as the primary audience.
I know you like to help people in their early career get into tech. Do you have any tips or recommendations for them?
Yeah, firstly, I think that there is no one way into tech. We're in an industry that is incredibly malleable in learning skills and being able to demonstrate those skills. So don't feel like you need to fit a single mold in order to enter. You can do that in your spare time. You might be able to find opportunities in your current career where you can upskill technically. I would also warn people with their early career, regardless of industry, that quite often the excitement of new roles allows you to give more of yourself to your job than perhaps you should. And whether intentionally or unintentionally, this can sometimes lead to unconditional job love, let's call it. And that can allow you to compromise yourself and your own interests. And when you start to see red flags or things that shouldn't really be happening, you may be more likely to turn a blind eye to them. And this is just, I suppose, a word of warning to those listening that don't do that. Like when something feels not right, you should trust your gut. You should always trust your gut. We're in an industry where there's a lot of demand for skill. And if something isn't going great, you should just, be looking at what else is out there and looking out for yourself as number one.
Another way that people can start to demonstrate or gain experience for getting into tech is with personal projects. Do you have any other personal projects that you've done that you'd like to tell us about today?
Yeah, I think one really exciting thing about being technical, being a developer, is you can see a problem that you face personally and start to think about how to solve it. Sometimes that is with writing code. Sometimes that's just with the kind of pragmatic problem solving that you develop through being a developer or engineer. I built loads of small projects to help myself out. I didn't want to upload photos of my kids onto social media platforms because I don't want to feed the machine, nor do I want to overshare before they have an opportunity to create their own identity. So I built a private photo sharing platform for family, where I knew where the data was held and who was accessing it, and I could manage the kind of access control of that. So that's pretty nice. That's still something I use quite regularly. I've joked with a few friends that I should create a little suite of open source projects called like Parent Kit, because I have quite a few kid-related little things. When my partner was in labour with our first child, I knew that I was going to have loads of people asking for updates, and I didn't want to be a PA to many people. That wasn't really my role. My role was to be present. So I built a little application that allowed me to basically batch update people over text when there were important developments. So loads of little things. At the moment, my primary project is You Got This, as well as my day job.
Why haven't we mastered speech-to-text translations yet? Or have we?
We haven't. If you think about, forget technology for a moment. If you think about just chatting with other people, even in a single language, there are loads of factors that can make it hard to understand someone. There are several dialects, accents, jargon, even just noise around us. And these all make it hard, perhaps, to understand what's being said. And then when you're talking about a machine, those problems definitely get amplified because a lot of the interpretation starts to become more difficult. That said, there are definitely some contexts where I think, from what I've observed at least, speech-to-text can be as or almost as accurate as a human. In this context here, there's one or two people speaking at a time. We've got nice microphones around us. There's not a lot of other noise around us. And in these contexts, speech-to-text technologies perform remarkably well. It's not to say it doesn't perform well in other cases, but I don't think it's quite reached human accuracy.
I'm sure people can imagine plenty of applications for it, but are there any in particular that you're specifically excited about?
Ooh, I think there's something really exciting about allowing people who maybe are a little more adverse or less confident with technology to still interact with systems that we build as developers. I'm thinking things like checking in on people, making sure they're okay, making sure they've taken their medication. They might not be okay to do that via an app. It might not be feasible to do that with a huge number of people with a call or a home visit, but you can collect that information with voice, perhaps, given the right, implementation of the technology. You could identify toxic behavior in voice channels, in games. Often, we can do that with text, but we can't necessarily automatically detect that with voice. There's a whole host of other examples, but I think that there are a couple that I've thought about which are perhaps less common.
What is it about developer advocacy that you particularly enjoy? And again, for people that might like to get into that, what would you suggest for them?
There are two reasons I love being a developer advocate. One of them is my complete lack of focus. If I work on one thing for too long, I struggle to stay focused on it. And developer advocacy is such a varied role. On any given day, I could be building demos, writing blog posts, delivering workshops, speaking at events like this. The variation allows me to, as I'm starting to struggle on a task, while being aware of deadlines, of course, shift my focus into something else, and that be a completely okay way to work. I also love it because at my very, very first entry into tech, I went to a hackathon. I was slightly bullied by a friend to go along to it. I was not a developer. I could not write code. But I had such an amazing time, partially because of the other attendees at the event being welcoming, and partially because of the work of developer advocates or equivalent roles who were supporting that event. They give you the time and help you be successful. And now I'm in a place where I can go out and help people be successful, often quite near the beginning of their career, and really have that impact where I help them realize, oh, I can actually do that. I am actually okay at that. And hopefully spark something that builds into, something more a career perhaps.
And so for people that want to become advocates, maybe they're developers today, is there a particular skill set they should build on top of their technical skills that will enable them to transition into that type of role?
So one of the challenges with developer advocacy is dependent on the business. It's a widely different role. So it really depends what kind of role you want to have. There's developer advocacy that is highly focused on creating content, or highly focused on delivering and attending events, highly focused on building developer tooling, so slightly more engineering focused. Regardless of which kind of specialism you end up in, it's definitely around empathy. Like, as developers, we understand what we expect from companies, and then we get to engage with companies and help them serve us better, and in turn serve others like us better, other developers. So you can build your skills in any one of these areas or multiple of these areas, and you just have to be able to identify, as you're seeing roles that are available, is this one that matches the skill set? Because that role might be a developer advocate, and that role might be a developer advocate, and the overlap, the Venn diagram of skills is minimal. So yeah, it could be any of those skills really.
So you talk about empathy being a core skill and common amongst any of these types of role, and indeed for the work we do, it's hugely important for people to have empathy for the people actually using the things we create. How can we help people improve their empathy?
I think that we just all need to take a step back as engineers and consider, as you say, the people who end up using the things we build. We all come to situations with our own unique experiences, our own unique abilities, our own unique thought processes. And if you are only building software for yourself, you are only going to be serving people like yourself. And conversely, you might be doing a complete disservice to others. So that starts at the very, very beginning, thinking through problem statements, thinking about how everyone is impacted by those problem statements, thinking about how you're going to build software that's inclusive and accessible to all, making sure you have diverse team members right from the very inception to the end, testing it, and then hopefully you are increasing your user base, I suppose, the people who can positively be impacted by the thing you build. I think one thing we often do is go, yeah, this will work for everyone. And by not even acknowledging that, okay, maybe we are not doing great in these areas, some people are going to come to your service, your product, your project, and are going to think this is going to be for them, and then it isn't. And that's even worse than not just owning the fact that you missed key parts of the process. So ideally that isn't the case, of course. In terms of building empathy, I would also encourage people, shameless plug, to go check out the You Got This library. We have a library at the time of recording of almost 100 free pieces of content, all about core skills. You don't have to sign up. There's no creepy trackers. There's no ads. You just go and you take this content and you go build your core skills. There are some pieces of content directly related to thinking about the impact of the work we create, as well as other core skills, of course.
We're in an age of tech where the mantra move fast, break things is commonplace. How do you think that aligns with empathy?
It can align with empathy, but it rarely aligns with empathy. Because when you're asking, okay, we're going to move fast and break things, you also have to be asking what you're willing to break. And if you're willing to break the experience for some users with disabilities or simply preferences, then you are doing a complete disservice. In the most crude way, you are limiting your user base. And with more empathy to my answer, you are actively making it difficult for some of your users to interact with your service. And so, yeah, it's always a check and balance. You need to be moving quickly while making sure that everyone has access. One of the worst things I see is when people are either oblivious to the fact that they are limiting access to some users, or they shrug it off and don't even acknowledge it. So if you are ever in the place where this is going to have to be something you do, which probably indicates you are not resourcing or planning your project correctly, you also need to own it and be really upfront about what you do and don't do, so people don't come to your project, think that this is going to be for them before realizing they are going to be excluded.
We've primarily talked about empathy and the technology in the context of accessibility. Are there any other opportunities for the technology that you can see either now or in the future?
I think there's loads. I think that voice is the primary way which we communicate to each other, like we're doing now, but it's really hard for developers and engineers to work with that data, understand what's being said, and maybe interpret what's being said. And I think that's where speech to text provides a really excellent set of opportunities to make sure that every single voice is heard and understood.
Thanks for a really fascinating conversation.
Thank you for having me.
To find out more about Kevin and Deepgram and all things PeepSec, please visit peepsec.com. See you next time.